Existence is complicated, isn't it? Here we are, adrift on a blue ball that spins on its axis, warmed by a dwarf star about 93 million miles away. This star, known as the Sun, is just one among billions in our galaxy, the Milky Way. And the Milky Way is just one among perhaps trillions of galaxies in a universe, or perhaps a multiverse, whose true nature and extent no one yet understands. Given this vastness, it's easy to feel insignificant. After all, who are we? Where did we come from? Where are we going? What does all this mean? And as if these existential questions weren't enough, we still have bills to pay. It's not hard to see why many fall into despair or feel a certain insignificance. But before we get completely lost in thoughts about our insignificance, let's take a step back. These existential questions are not new. Philosophers have been debating these issues for centuries, and modernity has shed new light on these concerns, leading us to a phenomenon known as nihilism. What exactly is nihilism, and why has this crisis of meaning gained so much traction over the last few centuries? More importantly, how have different philosophical currents, like existentialism and absurdism, attempted to respond to this crisis? For millennia, humans faced the fear of the unknown with the comfort that someone above was watching over us. Everything we did had a purpose, a meaning. However, as science advanced, these foundations began to be questioned, leading to a new way of viewing our existence and the meaning of life. This thought, known as existential nihilism, suggests that we are utterly insignificant and that nothing we do really matters. This idea has been widely embraced today, especially by young people grappling with hormonal fluctuations and seeking answers online. It's a perspective that can easily lead to despair, for if nothing has meaning, why continue? However, this pessimistic view is not the only way to face nihilism. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the greatest philosophers in history, stood out for his contribution to this topic. Nietzsche is often associated with nihilism, but this is a misinterpretation of his philosophy. In fact, he was one of the greatest critics of nihilism. Nietzsche not only recognized nihilism, but also saw it as something to be overcome. He observed that as science and rationality gained ground, belief in God and absolute values declined. His famous phrase, "God is dead," symbolizes exactly this: the collapse of a value system that gave meaning to human life. For Nietzsche, the death of God represented a void that needed to be filled. The absence of absolute values and an intrinsic purpose left humanity in a state of uncertainty and disorientation. This state is what Nietzsche referred to as passive nihilism, where people feel that life has no meaning, resulting in apathy and hopelessness. Passive nihilism can be compared to a diagnosis, a recognition of the crisis, but without finding a solution. But Nietzsche didn't stop there. He proposed a solution to overcome nihilism: active nihilism. Rather than succumbing to the lack of meaning, he encouraged the creation of our own values and purposes. Nietzsche believed that by recognizing that there are no absolute truths, we can live more authentically and meaningfully. We can become supermen, individuals who create their own values and live according to them. This idea of overcoming nihilism through the creation of personal meaning was a radical break from the philosophical tradition of the time. Nietzsche laid the groundwork for existentialism, a philosophical current that would later be popularized by Jean-Paul Sartre. The central idea of existentialism is that existence precedes essence. That is, we first exist, and only afterwards do we assign meanings to our existence. For Sartre, the absence of an intrinsic purpose or absolute values is not a reason for despair, but rather an opportunity for freedom. Jean-Paul Sartre summed up this idea by saying that man is condemned to be free. This freedom comes with the responsibility to create our own meanings and values through the choices we make. Without an absolute guide, every choice becomes meaningful and laden with responsibility. The feeling of emptiness and existential angst are inevitable when we realize the vastness of possibilities and the lack of a predefined path. However, this angst can be a call to authenticity and action. For Sartre, living authentically means accepting this freedom and responsibility and creating our own purpose. We can find meaning in the things we do, the relationships we build, and the passions we pursue. Artistic creation, philosophy, literature, and even simple everyday interactions can become sources of meaning. However, this freedom can also be frightening. Imagine, you can choose any path, but you are also responsible for the consequences of each choice. It's like choosing what to watch on Netflix, a decision that may seem trivial, but in Sartre's words, is laden with freedom and angst. What if you choose the wrong movie? What if you're wasting time? The responsibility is all yours. Kierkegaard, a precursor to existentialism, addressed this same existential angst differently. He introduced the concept of the leap of faith, which suggests that in the face of uncertainty and the absence of rational sense, we should take a leap of faith in God to find purpose and meaning. For him, faith is a conscious choice to believe in something greater, even without rational proof. Kierkegaard saw the leap of faith as a response to the despair that arises from freedom and the absence of an intrinsic purpose. Imagine standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing what's below. Kierkegaard would say to close your eyes and jump, trusting that something greater will hold you. It's an image that fits well with the metaphor of the leap of faith, an act of courage and trust, even without guarantees. This idea contrasted with the more secular approach of Sartre and other existentialists, who sought to create meaning without resorting to a deity. For Sartre, the freedom to create our own meanings was an opportunity, while for Kierkegaard, it was a responsibility that could be alleviated by faith. Kierkegaard's introduction of the leap of faith sets the stage for the philosophy of Absurdism by Albert Camus, which rejects both nihilism and the need for a leap of faith, proposing a different way of facing the existential void. Having understood the ideas of existentialism, we come to another philosophy that deals with the crisis of existence, Absurdism, popularized by French philosopher Albert Camus. Absurdism starts with the same premise as existentialism, the search for meaning in a universe that seems to have none. However, Camus took this idea to a different conclusion. Camus described the absurd as the conflict between the human quest for meaning and the indifferent silence of the universe. He saw life as an incessant struggle to find purpose in a world that essentially offers none. This confrontation between the search for meaning and the absence of answers creates a feeling of absurdity. But, contrary to what we might expect, Camus did not see the absurd as something that should lead to despair. He rejected both nihilism and the idea of a leap of faith, as suggested by Kierkegaard. Instead, Camus proposed that we should embrace the absurd and find joy and meaning in the very search. To deal with the absurd, Camus presented three options: take your own life, make the leap of faith, or embrace the absurd. If life has no meaning, why continue living? Camus argues that suicide is not a solution, as it does not solve the problem, but merely escapes from it. Life may not have an intrinsic meaning, but it can still be lived fully. Regarding the leap of faith, Camus had a clear opinion. Adopting a belief or ideology that gives us an artificial sense, such as religion or certain political ideologies, is like a philosophical suicide, as it involves believing in something that, deep down, may be false. Then he suggests choosing to embrace the absurd, recognizing the lack of meaning and yet continuing to live, finding joy and purpose in the very struggle against the absurd. This is Camus's response, which he believes to be the most authentic and honest. For Camus, the search for meaning in a universe without sense is in itself meaningful. He believed that by recognizing and accepting the absurd, we can live more fully and authentically. This acceptance frees us from illusions and allows us to focus on the here and now, appreciating the beauty and experience of life without expecting a greater sense. Camus illustrated this philosophy in the story of Sisyphus, a character from Greek mythology condemned to push a rock up a mountain only to see it roll back to the beginning of the mountain repeatedly for eternity. Despite the apparent futility of his task, Camus imagined that Sisyphus could be happy by accepting his situation and finding purpose in the very struggle. Imagine Sisyphus looking at the rock and thinking, "Ah, here we go again, but at least I'm keeping fit." Camus's point is that we can find meaning and happiness in the very struggle, even if the universe does not offer us clear answers. He challenges us to live intensely, and to appreciate every moment, regardless of the lack of a greater purpose. While existentialism invites us to create our own meanings, absurdism challenges us to embrace the conflict between our search for meaning and the lack of answers. Accepting the absurd can allow us to live with more intensity and authenticity, valuing each moment. So, instead of despairing over the lack of intrinsic meaning, Camus encourages us to live fully, to laugh at the absurdities of life, and to find joy in the simple act of existing. After all, if Sisyphus can find happiness pushing a rock endlessly, maybe we can find meaning in our own daily challenges. If all this sounds confusing, it's because it is. There are so many questions, so many possibilities, and in the end, no one really knows the answer. We are all blind groping in the immeasurable and endless dark. The simple fact of believing that a video would answer the fundamental question of life is, at the very least, absurd. I'll leave a table here that explains in a simplified way the differences between nihilism, existentialism, Christian existentialism, and absurdism, so you can choose how you want to face the void of existence. The question, "Is God dead?" raised by Nietzsche, is not just a statement about the absence of a deity, but a call to rethink the values that guide our lives. Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead, God remains dead, and we have killed him. How shall we, the murderers of all murderers, console ourselves?" He challenges us to find a new purpose in a world where old certainties have been destroyed. Nihilism, existentialism, and absurdism are responses to this crisis of meaning. Each of these philosophies offers us a lens to look at the existential void and encourages us to find a way to live authentically and meaningfully. In my opinion, the beauty of these philosophies lies in their transformative power. They challenge us to look within ourselves and to create meaning in our lives, even in the face of emptiness and uncertainty. The question shouldn't be whether God is dead, but how we choose to live in a world where we need to be the authors of our own destinies. I believe God is not dead. He is in everything and everyone. As the philosopher Plotinus said, we must never stop shaping ourselves, like a sculptor shapes a statue, until we become the most beautiful image of divinity. When we seek knowledge through philosophy, we are in a way shaping and transforming ourselves, finding God, and thus finding the meaning of life. I encourage you to reflect on these ideas, to question your own beliefs, and to seek a path that resonates with your own sense of purpose and authenticity. After all, the philosophical journey is personal and unique to each of us. If this video has brought new perspectives, encouraged reflections, or simply provided a moment to pause and think about life, then I have achieved my goal. Did you know that less than 1% of people who watch videos on YouTube leave feedback in the comments? Tell me down below what this video made you think about and what you thought of it. This will help me improve future videos and know if I'm adding value to people's lives. Continue exploring, questioning, and seeking reflections. Subscribe to the channel and watch the playlists on the screen. Until next time.